Running name. I am in the Days of Stereotypes, also known as I Die with a Warhammer in the Middle Ages, tell the story of a post-.90s Duruqi nobleman in the medieval Warhammer era. Through the protagonist's perspective, take readers to appreciate the cultural scenery of the medieval Warhammer. Known bug. Some evergreen species may appear prematurely. Keywords of the novel. Go dang 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 jing, no pop-ups. Go dang 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 jing, txt complete collection download. Go dang 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 jing, latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Aspiration to be a mental illness. You are listening at novel full.audio. Chapter 1. Aspiration to become a mental illness. The boundless thick fog enveloped the three-masted sailboat, and the light shining through the portholes became weak and dim. Daxus, who had been unconscious for 2 days, woke up in shock to the sound of waves crashing against the ship's hull. After waking up, he lay in bed panting heavily, his back soaked in sweat, and the fragmented memories in his mind kept overlapping and intertwined, as if to tear apart his soul. He looked blankly at the black pine deck above him, unable to accept the fact of crossing. MMP. The new car I just picked up. Daxus, who had been lying for a long time, calmed down and then struggled to sit up, surveying the rudimentary luxury cabin. There were several exquisitely crafted purple silk robes and brown thick leather kittons hanging in the wardrobe without a cabinet door. The candles on the candlestick on the table had already melted and extinguished, and a complete set of black steel forged armor was displayed on the armor rack. On the weapon rack were noble curved swords, a messer's knife, and a nearly 2.5-meter-long Duruqi halberd. Next to it was a pear blossom wood dressing table and a round drum stool with an incorrect painting style. Copper mirrors, wooden combs, and dowries were placed on the table. Daxus immediately reached out and touched his crotch, sighing in disappointment, "It's okay." Then he sat cross-legged and leaned on his chin to examine the Persian-style vase carpet on the ground. What kind of bizarre style are these? Yes, they are all plundered. Make the most of everything. Daxus began to recall, I also took this guy, and he could actually fall into the sea from using the restroom. What's going on? Surprisingly, it's the medieval world of Warhammer, or the Dark Elf Duruqi. The Nagaro's slave master gang. So what's the point? Bartonia is an old farmer, Sylvania is a blood slave, Duruqi is a slave, Scarvan is a slave rat, green skin is a fart spirit, unparalleled glory. Daxus smiled bitterly and continued to remember. Fortunately, this brother is a Duruqi aristocrat, especially a great aristocrat. There is no brother and sisters, but there is an unreliable cousin. Uncle Dulius is the commander of the evil temple of the Dark Arkansas. Anasera, the mother of the family, is an old woman over 6,000 years old. She is the Knight Governor of Crocoland, a good friend of Mora's, a powerful caster of Duruqi, Hecate, and a servant of the goddess of magic. Young Lord Nukul is an old man over 5,000 years old, Wallahar of Crocoland, a well-known fearlord, Trumpchi tactical master. Good guy, the black magic is really amazing. It's really impressive. Crocoland was originally ruled by 3 Knight Lords, and after a Byzantine-style political struggle, the military and political power of the city is now fully controlled by the Hellfire family. Those opponents either perish or become shadows in the Black Ridge Mountains. Duruqi had only 5 core cities built on the Dark Ark, along with the fortress city of Golland, which defended the northern barbarians. Crocoland was mainly responsible for shipbuilding and manufacturing the Dark Ark, providing food for other cities. What was this concept? This was the town of Weibo, which did not have the outbound warfare debuff, and the Anatolian military region in eastern Rome. System. What about the agreed-upon benefits for travelers? No, if Warhammer World had a system, it would be very cunning. Perhaps this noble identity is just a golden finger. The noise on the ship grew louder, and Daxus glanced at the porthole. It was foggy outside, and the sound of wiping the deck and walking could be heard from above. If you want to survive in the Trumpchi society, you have to be a lunatic and mentally ill. When normal people are mentally ill, it's time to face a new life. Saying that, Wandika stumbled to his feet, he put on a thick leather katan and draped himself in a silk robe. Fortunately, I'm not seasick. At this moment, a slight knocking sound came from outside the door. A young woman named Duruqi said, "Sir, have you woken up? Do you need breakfast?" Daxus went to open the door and saw a young woman named Druzi wearing a tight black silk dress, standing 2 swords away from the door holding a dining cart. "Good morning, sir. Are you feeling better?" said Darius expressionlessly, revealing half of her body and looking surprised as she saw the hatch open. Daxus looked at her calmly, as if looking at 40 golden bricks, and said in a hoarse voice, "Good morning, Elisa. Is there water?" "Sir, there is, and there is also the calming soup I made for you." "Do you need me to push the dining cart in?" said Elisa eagerly. Daxus nodded, stepped aside, and walked back to the table. Elisa lowered her head and slowly pushed the dining cart to the table. Then she slowly retreated out, and as she reached the door, Elisa said, "Sir, if you need me, just call me." She then slowly closed the door. Daxus roast. "You don't even take a servant on board, and you have to let the sorceress serve you. People are iron, rice is steel, and ogres eat iron and chew steel." As he spoke, he placed the food in the dining car on the table. "I can't tell what it is. Salted fish, white bread, beef and mushroom soup, milk egg cakes, black and thick tranquilizing soup and a bottle of water." Speaking of what Druzi eats. This question is too high. End, only how does Marikis use the restroom, and how many people in Druzi can match it? It's really good. There's no dark cuisine, like some nauseating horse meat patty, pickled fish meat, and forest spider spinneret sandwiched into 2 pieces of baked sweet bread. Cold mix fart brain, bread made from ancient tomb king bone powder grinding noodles. Go, go. Daxus first drank half a bottle of water and began to eat, pondering while eating. Is this dark and tranquilizing soup? Was it an accident when it fell into the sea before? Or was someone trying to cause trouble? Daxus was eating bread, looking at the bowl of calming soup, and carefully recalling the experience of falling into the sea 2 days ago. Standing on the side railing, urinating and being blown down by the crosswind. Is this outrageous? As a freelancer who has never attended high school, I know that I should go to the bow and stern of a sailboat to use the restroom. The 3 siblings of the Takaya family were brought in by my cousin, and they are going to the Karis kingdom in Ojuan to complete the family's traditional white lion ceremony. Afterwards, they assisted me in completing the trial of the Haksai voyage. The crew and soldiers are all members of the family, and I am not the illegitimate son of the Black Blade. I am the legitimate lineage of the Hellfire family, and if anything happens, one of them on this ship will have to be buried with the whole family." After finishing breakfast, Daxus scooped out the sticky soul soup with a spoon and poured it out of the porthole. Sitting at the front of the dressing table, he scrutinized his face, tied his long black hair behind his head and tied his ponytail. Hadrika, made of black steel, was worn around his neck, and 3 spiritual rings were worn on his pointed ears. The purple eyes of the pure Nagareth bloodline in the bronze mirror exuded a demonic aura, with a hint of coldness and malice on his sinister face. He smiled at the mirror with an indescribable evil intent. Lowering his head and caressing Hadrika's chest, the card bears the crimson family emblem of a multi-headed snake entwined around the Tower of Destruction. "This big gold chain is fine. Get up, put on the noble sword, and carry the Drucker's halberd onto the deck. The game has started. Please leave a comment, thank you." There are 4 main characters in the Hellfire family, from the 7th edition of the Dark Elf Army. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Takaya's 3 brothers and sisters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Takaya's 3 sisters. The cold winter sailed on the vast northern ocean amidst the fog, with its black sails reaching their limits and hunting making a sound. The crew wore worn-out thick leather kittons and worked hard to wipe the deck. The boatswain waved his long whip and scolded them, his eyes full of malice. The soldiers conducted morning exercises under the guidance of Centurion Edmund. Captain Daston's cold eyes were staring when he saw Daxus carrying a battle spear onto Class A and quickly asked the first mate to take over the rudder. The captain and Centurion walked to the swords of Daxus and bowed, saying, "Good morning, sir, young master." Daxus looked at the captain and thought to himself, "Dastan cold eyes. Bet with Lothia fallen hearts that he broke the third dark arc in the Sea of Claws. This is also a legend, but he is still an inexperienced captain now." Daxus waved his hand to Edmund to continue his training, and then slowly opened his mouth and said, "Good morning, my captain. How long do we need to get to the kingdom of Karis?" Without even thinking, Dastan Cold Eyes said directly, "Young master, we will arrive in the kingdom of Karis tomorrow." After hesitating for a moment, he continued, "Young master, last night we encountered a warship with the emblem of the kingdom of Iris. We used the night and fog to shake them off. Ojuan is like a toilet seat, consisting of 10 kingdoms from the outer and inner rings. The coast of the outer ring connects with the vast ocean, while the land of the inner ring surrounds the inner sea. The endless circular mountain range stands between the outer and inner rings, difficult to cross, with only a few specific mountain roads and tunnels accessible. Giant fortresses stand on the mountain roads. The first destination of Daxus is the outer ring of Ojuan, the kingdom of Karis to the north, and the kingdom of Iris to the east of the outer ring." Daxus hesitated for a moment and asked in confusion, "Is Iris's warship appearing in the waters of Karis?" "Yes, young master. You used to come over a lot." "Yes, young master. No Duruqi is more familiar with the waters of Ojuan than I am. I often transport some spies over," said Dustin with a cold and proud look. Daxus suddenly remembered a sentence from his past life. "To survive, one must have a unique ability." Then he nodded and complimented, "Amazing, go ahead and get busy first." Dustin coldly bowed his head and prepared to leave, when Daxus asked again, "Do you know how many years it is in the imperial calendar now?" "Young master, in 2008. Daxus was stunned for a moment and thought to himself, "Good guy. I'm still born in the 1990s, but if I'm lucky this time, I can survive for 550 years. Daxus walked to the edge of the deck and supported the railing, looking at the harvester crossbows wrapped in canvas, and then at the dense fog outside the ship. The summer monsoon caressed his face, and strands of black hair fluttered with the wind. Daxus heard footsteps coming from behind and turned around to catch a glimpse of 3 figures approaching, only a standard distance of 2 swords from Situan. The eldest brother of the Takaya family, Flanas, wore an old hinged plate armor forged from black steel. Tall and burly, with a standard Duruqi aristocratic face, full of ruthlessness, a head of glossy thick black hair, the whole person is introverted and calm. Hadrika, wearing a white lion emblem around her neck, is outdated and tacky, complementing the old and outdated armor. The second Ren, on the other hand, is completely opposite, wearing a beautifully crafted set of black steel hinged plate armor adorned with polished gilt. He looks very similar to his elder brother, almost carved from the same mold, with a hint of detachment and publicity. The youngest Elisa was wearing a tight black silk dress, with a violet cloak draped over her left shoulder. Wearing a pointed crown, a head of black hair draped over the right shoulder, and a pair of captivating amber eyes, like a rebellious leopard. Holding a staff in hand, there is a golden snake coiled on the staff. The snake's mouth was wide open, holding a huge emerald gem in its mouth. The 3 siblings saluted and said in unison, "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, we will arrive at the Karis coastline tomorrow. Would it be convenient for you to tell me about the White Lion trial?" Flanas glanced at Ren, who understood and said, "Sir, our Takaya family came from the kingdom of Karis before the Great Schism. To deserve this surname, family members must return to the kingdom of Karis, hunt and kill a white lion, and leave the land with its fur. Of course, killing the white lion's running dog of the false king can prove their worth. Daxus remembered that his cousin had told him before setting off that the Takaya family was one of the earliest families in the Karis kingdom to recognize Marikis as the legitimate Phoenix king. When Kalido learned about him becoming the next false king during Karis hunting, he immediately set out on the road to the Asuyan temple, but was intercepted by the Duruqi assassins led by the Takaya family on the way. If it weren't for a group of Karis woodcutters rushing out of the forest to protect Kalido, the Takaya family would have succeeded. Afterwards, the group of woodcutters became the lackeys of the false king, causing the reputation of Karis to be tarnished, and the White Lion lackeys also drove the Takaya family out of the Karis kingdom. When these three siblings were in their 20s, their parents died as Kane assassins and were subsequently taken in by an uncle. But that uncle had severe manic disorder. Helplessly, the three siblings killed their uncle on a night in their 50s and were later taken in by another uncle, Curon, who had completed the raid mission. Curon had proposed adoption while their parents were still alive, but his parents refused. Compared to their father, Curon discovered early on that his nephew and niece were very charming and talented. Curon provided the two brothers with more and higher quality aristocratic education with a limited amount of sovereign, and sent Elisa to the Tower of Destruction to learn how to manipulate the winds of Ghoul. These three siblings are now over 110 years old. The youngest Elisa has just completed 12 cruel trials from the Tower of Destruction and graduated successfully to become a beast-type sorcerer. Curon followed the elders of Daxus to participate in the Dark Ark raid and has not returned yet. The three brothers and sisters of Takaya were unable to maintain their ancestral home, so they were called in by Daxus's cousin to help. In short, one's own people. Daxus didn't want to burrow into the woods and shrugged, saying, "Wishing you success, it's time for training." After finishing, he carried his spear and walked towards the soldiers who were training, starting to warm up. The three siblings looked at each other and shook their heads. Daxus and Centurion Edmund practiced against each other, practicing movement and coordination, as well as stretching and distance. Although Daxus was only 16 years old and weak, years of aristocratic training made him very skilled in using various Drucker-style weapons. No one dares to mention the stubble of falling into the sea. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Lao Ren. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Fishing for people in the morning, Daxus opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling of the cabin. A slight knock came from outside the door, and Edmund said from outside, "Sir, it's time to get up and have dinner." Daxus sat up and asked, "When is it?" "Sir, it's past 9 o'clock. After breakfast, Daxus walked onto the deck, and the fog had dissipated. The three-masted schooner was anchored in an extremely concealed depression on the cliff. Edmund said, "Sir, the ship will arrive around 4 o'clock in the morning." The three siblings have already climbed the cliff along the rope. Dostan Cold Eyes also walked over and saluted, saying, "Young master, they have asked the boat to wait for a day. If you haven't come back tonight, you don't have to wait for them." Daxus asked, "Is there anyone on guard on the cliff? Is this place safe?" Edmund replied quickly, "Your Excellency, a team of soldiers has been sent up to guard." "Young master, it's safe here. This area is full of cliffs and there are hidden reefs outside. Under normal circumstances, no ship will pass through here, and even if it passes by, you won't see us." Daxus looked up at the cliff and frowned, saying, "Then why do I feel uneasy?" Dostan Cold Eyes and Edmund exchanged a glance. Later, Dastan's Cold Eyes hesitated and said, "Your Excellency. Will those three siblings encounter any trouble?" Daxus furrowed his brows tighter and his inner unease grew stronger. He looked at Edmund and asked, "Are there any soldiers who can track him?" "Sir, there are 2 captains and trainers who will track down." "Dustin, you stay on board the ship," Edmund orders someone, "will go chase after them." The 2 Duruqis turned green with fear and said in unison, "Sir." "Young master. You can't go." Daxus looked at the two of them, his inner unease about to reach a critical point, and said, "Execution. What a bad luck." After that, he quickly walked back to the cabin to wear his equipment. Returning to the cabin, Dustin coldly followed and stood at the door, saying, "Young master, can I assist you?" Daxus was wearing full armor and nodded. Dustin coldly lowered his noble curved sword from his waist and slowly placed it on the ground. Then, he took out the two serrated daggers from his left and right boots and placed them on the ground. Finally, in a strange posture, he took out the fist dagger on the inner thigh. Daxus stared at him dumbfounded, wanting to shout, "Good guy. You're quite good at hiding, kid." Dustin coldly raised his hands and walked slowly over to help Daxus put on his plate armor. Druzy's wartime equipment usually consisted of thick leather kitons worn at the innermost part, then covered with full body armor, silk robes, and finally plate armor. Daxus tied up his long hair, put on a quirky helmet, and looked at the Gothic-style black steel gilded dogong armor in his hand, as well as the pointed shoe armor on his legs. "I did the second set of Cold Lizard Fear Night radio gymnastics, and the Witch King Marikis is summoning. The armor, which blends black steel with sacrificial blood and is engraved with powerful talismans, is extremely lightweight and allows for easy movement of the joints, making it impossible to feel the weight. Wearing a mace sword with engraved talismans, carrying the Druzy halberd." Looking at Dustin's cold eyes, he said seriously, "You must keep an eye on the boat." Dostan frowned coldly and stared seriously at Daxus, saying, "Young master, I still don't agree with you going." Daxus sighed and patted Dastin's cold-eyed shoulder, saying, "Staying on the ship is also staying. We will be back before tonight. If there is really an accident, we will grab a boat. See Lyonnaise." Dostan cold eyes couldn't say anything more, his words stuck in his throat, and he sighed. Daxus had a stronger sense of unease in his heart, and as he walked up the deck, he saw 5 more ropes attached to the cliff, and the soldiers were climbing. What a rock climber encountering a landslide, it's so terrifying. Edmund. "Sir. What is the team configuration?" "Sir, we have already joined 2 teams, a mixed formation. One team is equipped with a captain, 4 fierce spearmers, 4 dark swordsmen, and 2 black sharp crossbowmen. 2 teams are black arc pirates, and 4 trainers. Do you need to hang your cold lizard up?" Daxus looked up at the height of the cliff and shook his head, saying, "I feel like it's too late. Bring more harpoon crossbows." After finishing speaking, he jumped onto the shallow beach and climbed the rope under the sea cliff. After climbing up, a trainer with a killing horse braid knelt down on one knee and said, "Sir, I saw a unique Druzy mark on the tree, which was left just this morning." Finally, Edmund, who was in the final battle, climbed up and Daxus took the harpoon crossbow and hung it on his waist, taking the eagle-shaped black pine-clad steel shield from a guarded soldier. Glancing at the 3-masted sailboat below the cliff, he exclaimed, "This position is really tricky. You can't even see it without flying in the sky. Let's go." Coincidentally, there were 50 Druzys in total, with 2 trainers leading the way and 2 mixed teams following behind. Daxus and Edmund also had 2 trainers pressing behind, and 2 black arc pirates scattered on the left and right, starting to advance into the forest. In the mysterious forest of the Kingdom of Karis, the white war lion is the most renowned beast. They are muscular and deadly feline hunters, with shoulders almost as high as Pokémon warhorses, but much stronger. They can break bones with every sweep of their claws, and even helmeted heads cannot withstand the gentle bite of their sharp teeth. Cold lizards are no match for them. In the depths of the forest, 5 fierce white lions lay on the ground, long dead. 2 lions were clearly passed by magic. Next to the body of the white lion, Flans is engaged in a life-and-death duel with a white lion guard using the Druzy halberd. Ren raised a shield and wielded a serrated sword to protect Alyssa behind her. Alyssa leaned against the tree trunk, her face pale and panting heavily. 2 white lion guards in the distance watched the duel, while the remaining dozen or so Asur, some wielding giant axes and some holding bows, surrounded the siblings and guarded the perimeter. Alyssa whispered, "I'll try to hold them down later. You see the opportunity and run away, don't turn back." Ren responded firmly, "If you want to die, die together." The duel between Flanneck and the White Lion Guard was extremely bloody, with both sides adopting a life-changing strategy. Flans was hit with an axe on his left shoulder, revealing deep bones. The White Lion Guard had a huge wound pierced through his right calf. Both sides had already recognized each other's family emblem, and when the enemy met, they were particularly envious. The White Lion Guard stared fiercely at Flannas and said, "You still have the face to come back from the Takaya family. Shut up. The Puppet King's lackeys. You have disgraced the face of the kingdom of Karis." The two sides started fighting again, and Flanagas launched a left flank attack, which was blocked by the giant axe of the White Lion Guard. Then, with a thrust, the axe struck Flanagas, who dodged to the extreme and grabbed his spear, smashing it towards the White Lion Guard's chest. The giant axe slashed into the air, and the halberd clenched fiercely against the chest of the White Lion Guard. The White Lion Guard took a step back, threw the axe at Flanneck, and then approached, grabbing the halberd with both hands tightly. Flannas was hit in the chest by a giant axe, with the axe embedded in the armor and spitting blood from his mouth. The White Lion Guard looked at Flanneck with a grim smile, pulling his spear back as if he had already seen the end. Flannas grabbed the halberd with one hand and forcefully pulled out the giant axe with the other, throwing it onto the ground. He sprayed blood at the White Lion Guard and then threw his halberd directly at them. The White Lion Guard couldn't react and leaned back. Flannas pulled out a serrated dagger from his waist and plunged it directly into the White Lion Guard's neck. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Rotation of Fate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Rotation of Fate. Enemy attack. Flannas lay on top of the White Lion Guard and fell to the ground. Two White Lion Guardians charged towards Flannas with axes in hand. A harpoon pierced through the air and directly penetrated the neck of a White Lion Guard. Daxus stared blankly at the White Lion Guard with blood spurting from his neck, and then looked at the harpoon crossbow in his hand, somewhat skeptical of life. Is it so outrageous? Can we even hit it? The Druzi soldiers began to surround and shout, "Druzi! Spear and shield!" The Black Ark pirate held a continuous crossbow in one hand and a sea dragon cloak in the other, launching a charge. After 4 animal trainers fired their harpoon crossbows, they hid behind the charging fierce spearmen and the gloomy swordsmen to load and follow up. The black sharp crossbowman also held a shield and raised his crossbow to advance and suppress shooting in the formation. Elisa manipulated the wind of Ghoul and summoned a scorching amber spear, piercing through the body of the White Lion Guard. The White Lion Guard looked down at the large hole in his chest and collapsed with an incredulous expression. The Black Ark pirate's combo crossbow shot down a large area, leaving a few Azza-wielding giant axes attempting to launch a decisive charge, while the archers also attempted to counterattack. Unfortunately, the 6th round of arrow rain hit, and there was no Asur standing on the field. Some injured people lie on the ground without dying, struggling to take out a dagger and stab their heart or cut their throat, choosing to settle for themselves. Those who lack social experience or cannot settle on their own are miserable. These little pitties are mercilessly tormented by Duruqi, and the cruel laughter of the abuser and the screams of the victim mix together to form a symphony of pain and cruelty. Daxus ignored them and quickly ran to Flanneck, flipping him over and trying to loosen the hinge on his shoulder. Ren and Elisa also ran over to help. Daxus roared, "Don't be so playful." He said to the 4 trainers, "You guys go peel off those White Lion skins." He then said to the Black Ark pirates, "You guys take off your cloaks and use spears to make a stretcher, while the others clean the battlefield." Under Edmund's command, the soldiers began to move, chopping heads, removing armor, collecting weapons, and skinning. Several soldiers worked together to place Flanneck, who was breathing weakly, on a stretcher. The fragments on his chest and shoulders had been cleared and powdered with medicine. At this moment, the rough and hoarse sound of the crows came from the forest, and Daxus followed the call, which frightened him. I saw a figure in the woods at some unknown time, a hunched old woman wearing a hood, ragged clothes, carrying a torn bag on her back, and leaning on a wooden stick in her hand. Although Darius could not see her face, he was certain that the old woman had been staring at him. The other soldiers also heard the sound and looked over, and the scene came to a standstill for a moment. Daxus shouted in disbelief, "Hello, old lady." The old woman was clearly stunned for a moment, and then disappeared out of thin air. Damn it! Am I dizzy? Kane is up. Is it a soul guardian? Can't do it. Daxus and several nearby Duruqis exchanged a glance and asked in confusion, "Have you all seen it?" "Sir, I see it." Alyssa said with certainty, "Yes, the weaver of the prophecy, Morag Heg, that's right." Daxus shrugged nonchalantly and said, "Shouldn't I say, Ashuyan's fire, to express shock?" Ren and Alyssa stopped their work and looked at Daxus with a bewildered expression. Then Ren looked at Alyssa and said, "Sister, has our fate been rewritten?" Alyssa shook her head and said, "I don't know. Your Excellency, thank you for coming today." After that, she was about to bow down on the ground. Daxus stopped her and shrugged, saying, "It's strange. I feel like I've received some kind of omen today, maybe it's really a guide from fate." Centurion Edmund began to command the soldiers loudly again to continue working. The battlefield has been basically cleaned up, and there are still a few soldiers who want to peel off the skin of Osir's cousins, because this thing is in high demand for Druzi. Darius said to Edmund, "Don't leave any trace, we should withdraw." Subsequently, the group returned along the same path, carrying Flanneck and the spoils of war. Walking to the cliff and seeing the soldiers still on guard, Daxus breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there were no accidents. The crew and the remaining soldiers left behind began to disembark, pulling ropes to spin out the three-masted cross-sail ship. The soldiers climbing down from the cliff also joined the ranks, and the sail operators on board were adjusting the sails. After all, this Duruqi three-masted plunderer was just a plain and unremarkable Krakolan shipyard-made cargo, without magical magic and engines. Daxus stood on the cliff, watching everything inside. "You're really a bunch of old sea dogs." Flanez lay in bed in the cabin, breathing weakly. Alyssa sat at the bedside to clean the wound again. Ren said to Daxus, "Your Excellency, thank you so much today." Daxus leaned against the bedside, holding his arms as he looked at Flanez, and casually said, "Your sister, it seems like you've said it before. Take care of your brother." After saying that, he left. Returning to his cabin, Daxus prepared to dismantle the armor. A crow gracefully flew to the porthole and tilted its head to look at Daxus. Daxus stopped and looked at the crow. "You don't belong here," an old female voice echoed in Darius' mind. Daxus was not surprised, after all, such an absurd thing had happened during his travels. Besides, this ghost place is full of power, and anything outrageous is not outrageous. Daxus said in his mind, "Ashuyan's fire. How did it drop? I was wondering if you could bring me back. Then I really appreciate you. Fate has changed, you have a glimmer of opportunity." Daxus looked at the crow with a disdainful expression in his mind and said, "What are you talking about? Can I end the arrival of the end? What is your relationship with Lilith? I am not familiar with you, and I cannot discern the future from you. Your fate is unpredictable. My grandmother, it's practical on the whole. I have already blessed you." Daxus thought of some legends, in which the archers of the elves believed in Morag Heg and believed that the crows would guide arrows to hit enemies. Thinking back to the previous harpoon, how could it hit a running object with just one shot from a long distance, or was it the neck, playing with horseback chops? "Oh, my respected grandmother, what's the price?" The crow ignored him, turned its head and gave him a glance before flying away. Daxus shouted a few more times in his mind, "Hello, old lady. My dear old lady. Old lady. Alright, goodbye. Really, there's no manners at all." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. 5 I have an idea you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. I have an idea. The three-masted schooner plunged back into the mist and headed towards Bartonia. Daxus lay in bed wanting to sleep, but couldn't fall asleep after tossing and turning. Helplessly, he picked up his spear and prepared to go to the deck for exercise. On the deck, Dustin Cold Eyes remained at the helm, while Edmund was still training with his soldiers. Why not train? Daxus stood on the deck and waved toward Stan Cold Eyes, shouting, "Edmund." The two of them put down their work and quickly walked over to pay their respects. Daxus leaned against the deck railing, blowing the sea breeze and said, "How is the situation?" "Young master, the ship has set sail and will arrive on the coast of Patonia in 2 months. This world is 24 hours a day, 8 days a week, and 400 days a year." Daxus nodded and looked at Edmund, who looked bewildered and unsure of what to say. Daxus looked back at the head hanging behind the mast and said, "Take good care of the head that duels with Flannas. That's his spoils. How many sets of armor have you captured?" Edmund replied, "Sir, I will arrange for someone to take care of it. One of the White Lion breastplates is completely worn out, and there are also 2 sets of White Lion armor and 14 sets of light armor." Daxus said boredly, "Are we here to do business or to have fun?" "Young master. Do you want to visit our cousin's village?" said Dustin coldly, understanding the situation otherwise. "Send someone to call Ren over and let's study it." The 3 Duruqi did not continue speaking, while Dustin Cold Eyes and Edmund pondered, while Daxus looked bored at the mast. Soon, Ren also walked over quickly. Daxus said, "I have a plan, a big plan." Then he said in Druqi, "Here we are, let's find a village to take a look around." After finishing speaking, he got up and walked up to Ren, looking at his brown pupils and saying, "There's something you need to do." At night, the 2 moons, Manaslib and Morslib, hung in the sky, and a tranquility fell on the land of Ojuan with a silver mist like moonlight. Ren appeared on the official road along the Ojuan coastline wearing White Lion armor and carrying a giant axe. Looking at the city wall flickering with lights in the distance, he took a deep breath and began to run against the wind. The village was surrounded by a 5-meter-high city wall, and the defenders on the wall began to guard when they saw Ren's arrival. Out of breath, Ren ran to the city gate and clung his axe to the ground, panting heavily. The captain of the guard on the city wall looked at him with a guarded expression, while the other soldiers drew their bows and aimed at Ren. Ren looked up and said, "A group of Druzi pirates have landed. Our team participating in the White Lion trial has been ambushed and dispersed." Captain Highway couldn't stand his flaws and asked, "Which family are you from?" "I am a woodcutter from Tau Gurd, not a nobleman." "What is the name of the daughter of the head of the Rutsai family?" Ren's heart thumped for a moment, but his mouth said, "Why didn't I know your excellency Solka had a daughter? Do you think I'm a spy? Lastly, what is the name of your excellency Solka's son?" Ren impatiently shouted, "Kohler, is it all over?" After learning about the situation, the village guards rushed up to the city building and nodded secretly upon hearing the conversation. Leaving his head out of the city wall, he asked, "How many Druzi pirates are there?" "Around the 40s, we broke through and ran away. I came to inform you to strengthen your guard. I need to go back and find my companion. Lord Enna of the Larian family is still in the forest," he said as he turned around and walked back. After hearing the noble name, the captain of the garrison became lively and said, "Wait a moment, I will send a 100-member team of the Coast Guard to follow you." The centurion of the centurion held a torch and observed Ren's brown pupils with a guarded expression. Seeing that the black and purple pupils were not unique to the kingdom of Nagareth, he breathed a sigh of relief. Ren and his team of 100 people began to slip away, guiding these unlucky people into the ambush circle deep in the forest. Seeing the ambush circle, Ren said, should we put out the torch? Why is it so quiet around here? Are we being targeted? The centurion looked at him with suspicion and handed him the torch of the soldier beside him. He said, take it and lead the way ahead. The others should extinguish their torches, lean together, and don't scatter. If there is any danger, gather information as soon as possible. Ren looked angrily at the centurion, took the torch, and walked ahead. Suddenly, I stopped in front of a tree trunk and looked up. Then Ren said, there is a mark on the tree, and my people are nearby. Praise the god of fraud. After speaking, he threw the torch out and rolled his body behind the tree trunk, shooting an arrow at Ren's stop on the tree trunk just now. After firing an arrow, the centurion roared angrily, there is an ambush, form in formation. The guards gathered together, relying on tree trunks, to form a small phalanx. In the middle of the phalanx, the guards' archers pulled their bows and arrows, and the forest was dark and dark, with nothing to see. The guards were panting nervously. In the distance, Elisa got up from the ground, raised her golden snake staff and began to manipulate the wind of Gu air, muttering curses. Several fierce spearmen also got up and lined up with shields in front of Elisa. The forest is activated by the wind of Gu air. A strong wind blew through the trees, and a storm composed of nearby branches and leaves swept towards the Triton. The branches whipped and thorns tangled, causing the trapped Triton to scream in agony. The guard over there was screaming in agony, while Daxus was slipping away. He muttered to himself, so there are more than 6 magic spells. Is this forest revival or earth awakening? Aren't those all life spells? Elisa finished casting the spell and leaned against the tree trunk, panting heavily, with a cold sweat on her head. Looking at Daxus, he said, Sir, I have released the wood awakening spell. Their formation should be chaotic. Daxus joked, you're a bit weak, you need to make up for it. Then he shouted, Edmund. Edmund exclaimed with a clear understanding, attack. Trump-chi, spear and shield. Praise Cain. Still following the old routine, the black sharp crossbowmen and the crew brought out began shooting with crossbows. The fearless spearmare and the sad swordsman raised their shields and pressed forward, while the black arc pirates and the beast tamer followed behind the spearmare and swordsman in shooting. After the 6-shot crossbow box was shot empty, the black arc pirate hung the consecutive crossbow directly on his waist, drew out weapons, fishing nets, grappling hooks, and steel chains with barbs. The animal trainer also took out a whip after shooting the harpoon. The formation of highway was already unsustainable, some were shot dead by flying crossbows, some were cut in the eyes by leaves, and some were tripped to the ground by thorns. Charge! Daxus also wielded his sword and shield to kill, while the black arc pirates threw their fishing nets and steel chains over and began to engage in close combat. The slaughter has begun. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Rainy Night Solo Dance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Rainy Night Solo Dance. The battle has come to a devastating end. Daxus effortlessly chopped down 4 sea guards and injured them. Not existing. There is no intense reaction after killing someone, just like killing a chicken. Although he has never killed a fish in his past life, he is a perverted and murderous person in his dreams, and his methods are cruel and he cannot be caught for committing crimes continuously. Ren held a serrated dagger and walked towards the centurion with a sinister and malicious expression. At this moment, the centurion, who had more intake and less output, lay on the ground looking at Ren with hatred, spitting out blood as if wanting to spray Ren's face. If I ask you to shoot me, I will use a sharp dagger to peel off your scabbed skin and muscles, cut open your ribs, and see your atrophied organs. I will use a hook to prick your pitiful face into a mask. Daxus shook his head and walked over impatiently, cutting off the head of the centurion with just one blow. Kicking the head to Ryan, he said, I don't have time to play, Edmund. Edmund was in charge of directing the cleaning of the battlefield when he heard the voice calling out to him and quickly ran over. How many people were lost? Sir, 5 people died in battle and more than 10 were injured. Daxus pursed his lips and said with a disdainful expression, purely useless, take off the armor of these guards. Let some crew members and injured escorts take prisoners, armor, and corpses back. Whoever killed them, I killed them. Do you hear that? Drucker, who was cleaning the battlefield, responded one after another. Daxus began to remove the hinges from his armor and said, change to the armor of the Shanghai Guard, let's go for a spin. The group, wearing the armor of Triton, circled in a big circle to the opposite direction when Ren went to the village. Just as the sky was still clear, it started to drizzle lightly, and we marched in formation to the bottom of the village walls. At this moment, the rain had already started to rain heavily, and the captain of the guard on the city wall looked at the guard below and shouted, who are you? This time it was Darius, who shouted, we are the patrol ship of the Kingdom of Iris, the Oak. I haven't heard of the Oak, how did the people of the Kingdom of Iris appear here? We are intercepting pirates on the west side of the Withered Archipelago, and a group of Duruqi pirates have landed here. The captain has instructed us to land south and search for the traces of those Duruqi raiders. Have you found anything? Can we come into shelter from the rain and provide some supplies? We need to return before dawn. What are the names of the 2 brothers of the Iris family, Izarian and His Excellency Aglan? Captain Highway nodded and ordered his soldiers to open the gate. Come in, there's nothing we've found. That group of pirates should have landed in the west. A White Lion training team has been attacked. The city gate was opened, and Daxus led his people directly into the city wall. Fortunately, it was not a walled city. Captain Highway also realized that something was wrong and shouted sternly, there's a problem. Lower the city gate. Shoot arrows. 2 unlucky Druzzies were directly killed by the falling city gates below the city. Daxus raised his shield and drew out the messer's knife, leading the way, cursing and speaking fragrant words that neither side could understand. A certain Han family member from Delilah has been shoveled to death and thrown into the street. Using a shield grid to block the piercing spear, he swung close and killed the unshielded guard. The scorching blood sprayed all over his face, almost making his eyes unable to open. The Black Ark pirates rushing up from behind protected him, throwing down their shields and drawing out the double blades, fist daggers, sawtooth short daggers, and classic 3-piece set. They engaged in close combat with the guards in a completely crazy life-changing gameplay, extremely fierce. Alyssa quickly released a spell of Vizan's wild form, applying a buff effect to the incoming Duruqi soldiers. Then she cast the Fury Claw spell, abandoning the golden snake wand and turning her hands into sharp claws to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Daxus became more and more brave as he killed, and in a short while, he nailed 1 to death with the spikes of his shield and struck 3 to death. The soldiers rushing forward, led by Edmund, fought desperately to pull the city gate, and the Duruqi soldiers holding shields downstairs to defend against arrow rain also rushed in. In the distant forest, Ren was playing with the head of the centurion. When he saw the city gate open again, he quickly placed the head on his waist. Charge! Remember the signs, don't hit your own people. Duruqi, number 50.60 in Linzili, raised his shield and quickly charged towards the city gate. The coastal guards in the village, who were waiting for rotation while sleeping, were awakened by the shouting of killing. They quickly rushed out of the barracks and lined up to kill the city gate. Since the reform of the Puppet King in Ojuan, all the people of Assur have been soldiers. When a 16-year-old man reaches adulthood, regardless of whether he is a merchant, fisherman, poet, or whatever, he must undergo armed training. The militiamen, wearing their equipment, rushed towards the city gate with spears, shields, and bows and arrows. The Duruqi soldiers who rushed into the village and town, led by the captain, rushed straight to the reinforcements of Highway. The 2 groups of former compatriots were extremely jealous and fiercely stabbed each other with shields and spears. The black sharp crossbowmen and crew climbed up to the top of the house to provide long range support with crossbows. The militia that arrived later were shot down, and some unlucky Druzy archers were hit by bows and arrows and fell. Daxus on the city tower saw that the guards on the city wall had been cleared, and the soldiers rushed in and quickly said, "Edmund, go down and maintain the line. Black Ark pirates, come with me." The duration of Elisa's wild claw has passed, and her hand has returned to its original shape. She picked up the golden snake wand and released a spell of Vizan's wild form for the fighting Druzy soldiers below. Daxus led 2 dissatisfied Black Ark pirates to circle around the town. After circling for a while, I saw Ren also leading people around. The team and the flow were directly blocked behind the militia, and the ossuaires were stuck together, unable to balance the front and back, and unable to advance or retreat. The screams, howls, and sounds of fighting echoed through the village. The Battle of Osur in the street lasted until the last moment, and with the fall of the garrison commander, the battle ended. There's not much morale left, the team has collapsed. This is Osur's home, they have no way back. Daxus raised his head and shouted, "It's time for the carnival. Everyone will catch me alive, don't be so bad as to kill me. Isn't fighting for this moment." The Druzzies praised Cain and Daxus in unison. With an excited scream on his face, he dispersed and began to plunder. All spoils of war must be submitted and distributed, but the process is crucial. Daxus walked alone back to the city building. At this moment, the rain began to light up, and a symphony of pain and cruelty rang out in the village. The captain of the Sea Guard, who had many problems, had already been hanged at the city gate, his body swaying in the wind. Daxus looked at the 2 moons in the sky from the city tower. "What if it's me or not? Only today will you know that I am me. Ha ha ha." Daxus threw away the messer's knife in his hand and let out a wild laugh, a mournful cry, half full of terror and half full of pride, like the voice that could only be made from hell, like the voice that the soul in pain for being punished to hell and the devil cheering for the soul falling into hell jointly emitted from their throats. Accompanied by the symphony, Daxus strolled, kicked, spun, and jumped in the rain, sometimes like a fool, sometimes heroic, his heart swaying, as if no one was around. He let go of his embrace and let the rain wash away. Elisa walked up the city tower at some point and quietly watched Daxus in the rain. Daxus reached out his hand and said, "Let's have a dance. How can I refuse the invitation to dance together?" End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Raffi in 782. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7, Year 7.8 Tula fight. It was another morning, and today Daxus woke up earlier than before because the whole ship was restless and the air was filled with a smell of blood. On the deck, Dustin Cold Eyes remained at the helm, while Edmund was still training his soldiers. Daxus observed the Duruqi on the ship, feeling that they were working and training harder today, and seemed eager for time to pass. Daxus leaned against the deck fence and smiled vaguely, calling for Dustin Cold Eyes and Edmund to come over. "Good morning, sir, young master. And, have the statistical results come out yet?" Dastan coldly said, "Young master, a total of 363 Azza have been captured, and the spoils of war are still being counted." "Oh, good guy. Did you complete the target this time? How many soldiers died in battle?" Speaking, Daxus exaggerated his applause. Daxus is required to complete the Haksai trial, which is a tradition of Druzy. After reaching adulthood at the age of 16, nobles need to embark on a plundering voyage, plundering along the coastline, and obtaining family status and positions based on the amount of wealth plundered. A live Osur is only valuable and is claimed to be equivalent to weight in the Duruq society. The Druze nobles would buy them at high prices to do unknown things, but most of them were worshipped to Cain or made into leather goods that drove Druze crazy, such as boots, carpets, khetons, sofas, and sails. "Yes, congratulations, young master. No one will try to rob Ojuan in Huxier," said Dustin Cold Eyes, complimenting him. Daxus smiled and looked at Edmund, asking, "Loss?" Edmund also complimented, "Congratulations, sir. 39 soldiers were killed in battle the night before yesterday, 8 were seriously injured, and many were lightly injured. Pacify the soldiers and crew, and distribute the spoils after weighing them back. Don't let me play with them, they are all golden sovereigns. How long do we have to float? Dostan Cold Eyes organized his words and said, Sir, there are still nearly 5 months left. Upon hearing that there were still 5 months left, Daxus looked distressed because he really didn't like to float on the sea. Let's go to Batonia for a walk. 2 months later, at midnight, Daxus was awakened by Dustan's cold eyes. The cold winter encountered a Bartonian merchant ship, who saw them turn around and ran away. After wearing armor, Daxus stood on the deck and looked at the escaping ship in the distance, asking, Where have you been? Young master, we're almost at Bordeaux. Brionne was plundered by Lacus not long ago, right? Yes, young master, only 35 years old. Catch up and sink it. Drink wine from exactly 1982. Dustin Cold Eyes began to command the pursuit in confusion, the alarm rang, and soldiers and crew began to take their positions. The harvester's crossbow, wrapped in canvas, lit up. This was Duruqi's killing weapon, a heavy weapon consisting of a hammer and crossbow rope that could shoot hail like bullets or a crossbow arrow capable of piercing the skin of a dragon. Arrows are all equipped with barbs, and once pierced, it is difficult to pull them out. Those victims who have been shot but have not yet died will all suffer great pain when the arrow is pulled out, and those who survive will become useless, not as useless as slaves. On the other side, there was only a merchant ship similar to Karak. The three-masted and horizontally sailed plunderer quickly caught up, and the slasher crossbows on the deck began shooting at the waterline position of the merchant ship. The merchant ship burst into pieces and sawdust flew in. After firing 3 rounds, the two ships began to sail side by side, and the Reaper's crossbows switched to shotgun mode, aiming at the sailors on the deck. The Bartonian sailors on the opposite side let out desperate cries, with crossbows and crossbows fired. The crew on the merchant ship's deck fell like leaks, with corpses scattered everywhere. The sound of mournful cries made Daxus heart-wrenching. Daxus shook his head and pondered, it's not appropriate for a good and excellent old farmer to come out and run the ship. After pondering, he laughed heartily and waved his index and middle fingers to point to the merchant ship, saying, I, the nobleman, have a good heart. I can't hear this sound, I won't leave a single one. The soldiers and crew who heard the command looked excited, and the iron hooks and ropes began to be thrown over. The Black Ark pirates and crew who couldn't wait swung over directly. The jumping gang battle has begun, and there is no doubt that it is still a one-sided massacre. Dostan Cold Eyes and Ren also jumped over, and Dostan Cold Eyes stayed behind for a long time without moving his muscles and bones. Alyssa stood at the position where Daxus had swung his sword, holding a golden snake staff. She looked at Daxus's profile and showed no interest in the battle, not even willing to use magic. Daxus sensed that Alyssa had been watching him all along, lying on the fence and staring intently at the merchant ship across from him. With the sound of slaughter, Alyssa gathered her courage and slowly leaned over. Daxus had no choice but to turn back and look at her calmly. Alyssa stopped and looked at what Daxus wanted to say, but couldn't say anything. Daxus looked faintly at her flushed face under the firelight and quickly said, Aren't you going to play across the street? Alyssa shook her head and said, Sir, it's boring. Daxus stood up and shrugged, saying, Then I'll go over and see what good cargo is on the ship. He then jumped over. Alyssa walked back to the cabin feeling lost, while Flanac lay in bed looking at her and sighed, He rejected you. That's okay. Alyssa angrily shouted at her brother, and turned around to walk back to her own cabin. The battle is nearing its end, except for the pitiful ghost trapped in the lower cabin. Daxus chopped down a struggling sailor lying on the ground, stepped directly on his body, and sighed, Oh dear, may Lilith bless you. No, sorry, may Mana bless you. Opening the mask, the warehouse was filled with towering oak barrels, and the rich aroma overflowed from the barrels, making people intoxicated. Daxus took a deep breath and praised Asuyan's fire. What did that say? Wine doesn't necessarily get better as it ages, nor does it get more expensive. Only the one that suits you is the best. Bang! A lead bullet shattered the deck next to Daxus's feet, embedded in the nearby oak barrel, causing him to jump up in fear. The woman's mournful roar and the sound of weapons colliding came from the cabin. Dead on the street, what's going on? Daxus was still in shock, cursing profusely and carrying a knife. He quickly walked down the cabin with a fragrant mouth. Who fired that gun specifically? Dostan cold-eyed faced off with a woman holding a dual sword, her smoking flint pistol falling beside her. The Black Ark pirates took out their catapults and surrounded her in a circle. Daxus leaned over and looked at the woman, who looked just like that, wearing a palace dress with big waves, but he always had an indescribable feeling. My dear captain, I bet you that this woman is older than you, and the bet is 10% of the spoils after weighing. Dostan coldly took 2 steps back and turned back to look at Daxus in shock, with a look on his face that you weren't joking. Daxus showed a provocative smile and looked at Dostan coldly. Dostan gritted his teeth with cold eyes and said, I bet, a treasure map. What does it mean that people are addicted to food? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Bloody Tsar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Bloody Tsar. Daxus displayed an extremely exaggerated aristocratic etiquette and said to the woman in imperial language, Hello, beautiful old lady, do you need us to serve you? The woman's eyes widened and she opened her mouth, wanting to speak, but she was afraid of the crossbow next to her. She hesitated and hesitated to speak. Ren and Edmund rushed over when they heard gunshots. Then Daxus said, Nothing, where are you going? The woman suddenly shed tears and opened her mouth, saying, I'm going to Mushilong. My father is seriously ill and I'm going back to take a last look. She then wiped her tears with her hand. Daxus exclaimed directly, Why does a 100-year-old woman pretend to be a virgin? This shout startled Duruqi beside him, and Ren and Dostan burst into laughter without stopping their cold eyes. Edmund and the Dark Ark pirates next to them looked bewildered. Darius said again, Why don't you say you're going to the Silver Summit? Believe it or not, I'll nail you into an iron coffin, tie you to the ship's anchor, and sink you into the sea. The woman was completely panicked. She didn't even hold her sword firmly and fell directly to the ground, causing her to collapse and sit on the ground. Daxus continued, Let me guess. Are you running away? The woman quickly adjusted herself and stood up again. She said frankly, Yes, I was reported by those Lemia sisters. Daxus smiled, and then said in Duruqi to Len and Dostan with cold eyes. She is a vampire lurking in the human world. She was formerly a member of the Lemia Sisters Association. Now she has been reported to the authorities by sisters, and her identity has been exposed. After listening, Ren and Dostan gave each other a cold glance, and then Ren joked, How come I hear this trick so familiar? The group of Duruqis burst into laughter, and the cabin was filled with joyful air. Old lady, how old are you? What is your name? The woman blushed, gritted her teeth, and her veins broke out on her forehead, saying, My name is Tatlin, I'm almost 400 years old. As soon as he finished speaking, Dastan's cold-eyed face turned green. In his early 30s, he still had limited knowledge and was trembling with anger. His right hand held a blade and trembled as he pointed at her. Duruqi was fond of gambling in various ways, even if it was a gamble on his own life. No one likes to lose, you can cheat, but it depends on who the other person is. Damn it, I thought you were Genevieve. Who is Mrs. Melissa Dack from? Tatlin looked at Daxus in shock and said, That's my grandmother. Who the hell are you? How do you know so much? Daxus nodded and said, Since you have asked sincerely, then I will tell you with great compassion. I will not change my name, I will not change my surname, Druzikaran Karl, the famous Lakshya Fallen Heart. Ryan and Daston's cold eyes almost collapsed again. It seems that you can't say hello to Ms. Neferta on my behalf. I'll send you to see your father at Muselin, and you'll find a way to handle the rest yourself. Then he said, let's go and start moving the goods. The ship is full of wine, so have a good drink today. The water on the ship has grown green fur. Why did Daxus happily let this woman go? Because this vampire is likely to be the longest reigning Tsar of Kisrif in the future, known as the Bloody Tatlin. The court ministers were all female vampires, and the old men of Boy couldn't bear it anymore. In the end, her son Pavel stood up and forced her to have a stroke. Daxus seems to understand what that indescribable feeling is, its fate. Stepping out of the cabin, the sky was already dimly lit. After finishing his meal, Daxus returned to the cabin to catch up, and when he got up, Dastan Cold Eye sent over the treasure map. I casually opened the treasure map of sheepskin and started studying, asking, where did it come from? Do you have any ideas? Dastan said coldly, I won the bet and let go for a while, I can't tell where it is. Daxus gave Dastan a cold glance, does that mean you're fooling me? Dastan Cold Eyes quickly explained in a hurry, young master, last winter the Black Ark Despair Shadow was repairing supplies at Crocoland. I won it from that commander. If it weren't for me serving the Hellfire family, he could have killed me. Daxus pondered and said, really? I don't talk about martial arts. Reluctantly nodding, he handed the treasure map to Dastan Cold Eyes and said, let's talk about it when you become the governor. This location is the Dragon Islands. Dastan coldly took the treasure map and knelt down directly, bowing in reverence. Coming out this trip, waiting for this sentence. Got it, okay. Keep it safe and bet less in the future. It's not important if you lose the treasure map, don't get involved. 5 days later, along the Muselin coastline. Daxus said to Tatlin, you know how to swim, right? Tatlin looked silently at the coastline, which was still some distance away. Alyssa and Daston's cold eyes beside her couldn't wait to kick her down. Alyssa wanted to kick her because this vampire had been trying to get close to Daxus these days. Can you return the weapon to me? Daxus turned his fingers around the gilded flint pistol, but suddenly stopped and arched his body. The flint pistol was aimed at Tatlin from the waist side, perfectly fitting into the American style. If you don't say it, I've forgotten. If you stay on the ship for 5 days, it'll be the fare. Take out the bullets and the note. You. Tatlin had no choice but to take it out and throw it on the ground. What attitude, you can leave now. Tatlin glared angrily at Daxus and gritted his teeth, saying, you're really a gentleman. Thank you for your praise. Goodbye. Dear lady, we will come and see you if there is a chance. Tatlin ignored Daxus and jumped into the sea, swimming towards the coast. Daxus aimed his gun at Tatlin, who was being gouged by the dog, and said coldly, give her a boat. She will definitely kill the rowing sailor when she comes ashore, drain his blood, and demonstrate to us. Young master, I still don't understand why I let her go, Dustin asked with a cold and puzzled look. Alyssa checked the strip and bag to prevent any magic, blades, or traps. After confirming their accuracy, she picked them up and handed them to Daxus. Daxus first used a tongs to open the barrel of the gun, loaded gunpowder, and put the lead bullet into the muzzle. Then, he used a tongs to insert it and aimed his gun at Tatlin, who was still being gouged by the dog. With a loud bang, the bullet hit the sea next to Tatlin, splashing a splash of water. Darius shook his head regretfully. Lakshia's fallen heart. I remember you. You bastard. Don't let me meet you again. Tatlin worked even harder, his voice gradually fading away. Daxus blew the muzzle of his gun. Don't ask, asking is fate. P.S. There is a small bug in this chapter. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. 9 A Piao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. A Piao. The cold winter made a grand stop at the mouth of the Grismari River at the border of Poldero and Muzilan. At the mouth of the sea, on the side of Poldero is a cliff, while on the side of Muzilan is a low-lying swamp. The height difference of the terrain on both sides forms a towering and winding cliff. The tourist warning lighthouse stands on the cape on the side of Poldero. As a lighthouse, it enjoys the reputation of being one of the most reliable lighthouses in the Old World, although there are no ships sailing here now. In fact, it is the temple of the wisdom goddess Verena, whose main purpose is to monitor Muzilan. It is said that the priests of the temple can use the powerful magic bestowed by the goddess of wisdom to peek into the entire cursed duchy of Muzilan. They refuse to say what they are looking for, or what they would do if they found it. Meanwhile, the priests insisted that they could not personally enter Mushilong. As is well known, the female prophets of the lake goddess, even the lake goddess, have visited the tourist warning lighthouse, but the purpose of their visit remains a mystery to this day. The priests here will provide advice to those who come to seek help, and it is very good advice. The temple sells many books, and anyone who purchases any book here will automatically receive a hearing opportunity. Priests sometimes take the initiative to provide advice, especially advice for adventurers to venture into Muzilan. To summarize in 2 words. Landmarks. The people in the lighthouse temple must have seen the winter signal, but they can only have big eyes on small eyes. Daxus did not believe that there would be prophets or lake fairies as guests at this moment, and then a comet of Casadora would hit the ship. There were not so many coincidences, and besides the comet falling, there was also a magical mast. Since 1814 in the imperial calendar, when the Duke of Lyonnaise, who had long been at odds with Muzilan, killed the Duke of Meraven, most of Muzilan's northern territory has been annexed by Lyonnaise, leaving Muzilan with only a palm-sized territory since then. In the swamp, one can still vaguely see the figures of both humans and ghosts. It should be the hard-working Nuzawa man, professional snail catcher, and frog hunter, whose work is tedious and time-consuming. All creatures in the swamp legally belong to the Lord, and becoming a swamp man requires the tacit consent of local nobles. Some nobles require a long apprenticeship experience and oath, and are only allowed to hunt in the Lord's swamp when claiming to be a swamp man. Otherwise, the fate will be extremely tragic, and they will be punished for stealing the Lord's finances. This group of swamp men must always pay attention to the surrounding movements while working. It is said that there is a huge worm in the swamp that can suffocate people in one gulp. There are often moving dead drifters floating in the river, not to mention bandits and beast men. The captured prey is then cleaned by the frog wife, who is not only an expert in cleaning frogs and snails, but also an important component of the social structure of the Batanian village. On the deck, the 3 brothers and sisters Daxus and Takaya, as well as the 5 Duruqi nobles Dustin Cold Eyes, basked in the sun and drank afternoon wine. Flanaz is already able to walk normally, but he cannot train properly yet. It must be said that the elf's physique is really strong. Daxus wants to eat the trout in the Grismari River, and the trainers lead the dark Pegasus out to the swamp to find some snails from the villagers. Edmund and the first mate were fishing with some crew members and soldiers, and there were also some soldiers on guard. Just now, a crew member had a bad luck and caught an A Piao. A Piao wanted to climb onto the ship to visit, but was mercilessly stabbed and exploded by the fearless spearmare using the sky piercer. Fortunately, there was no Nate Pag-possessed body that caught the specialty dragon leech from the Grismari River. It was an 8-meter-long, 1-meter-wide snake-shaped undead with a soft and slippery outer skin that had decayed and no bones inside. A mouthpiece full of teeth, extremely disgusting. These 5 Duruqi nobles were chatting about the customs and traditions of Patonia, from noble knights to truffles, and then to the tomb of the Duke of Meraven. Daxus collapsed on the chair, half squinting his eyes, crossing his legs, leaning on his chin with his left hand, and spinning the flint pistol with his right hand, feeling extremely comfortable. I casually told a few Barto jokes, which made the 4 nobles burst into laughter. I don't know if it's really funny or if it's really funny. Ren exposed his desire to explore, but was ruthlessly rejected by Daxus. Ghost knows where the tomb raised by the knights is located, and Maravan lies inside waiting to see the sun again. Daxus is not interested in the armor and Black Lily rune sword, and the side plot. It doesn't exist, he just wants to pass the garbage time by completing the KPI. Besides, we can't stay here for too long, and the Bartonian Navy is not a dry lunch either. Navigation is boring, especially when it comes to staring or not working. In addition to Eliza, he can also talk with the little sisters remotely with a crystal ball. Daxus not only practices his fighting skills but also shoots arrows every day. He decides to add 3 skills to himself, namely cooking, painting and musical instruments. Originally, there were 4 players and 1 Go game, but the Duruqi society is really not suitable for this kind of thing. There are no chess friends and they are too close together, so they have to resort to various tricks. The kitchen on the ship is very advanced, and the entire cabin is made of Hagrid Graves black marble, which can be used for open flames, and there is also a bread oven. The fish were killed by the crew, and Daxus, who had no strength to bind the chicken, lacked the courage to kill a fresh life. Daxus used the only ingredients to make a Barto-style baked snail and sauté trout, and after finishing, he sent some to Edmund and the first mate. After the 4 nobles ate it, they all cheered, but Daxus felt average. Cooking well, everyone just had a good time eating. After finishing, Daxus exercised on the deck for a while and then went back to sleep. There is an urgent need for fresh water on the ship now, and there is not much fresh water left, and it has been left for too long, causing green hairs to grow. Now when Daxus is thirsty, he drinks wine. Druzy's physique does not require anything like oranges, and there is no such fruit in the plantations of Krakoland. But Daxus doesn't want to land in the exile land of Muzelin, who dares to drink the water here. Besides, the knights here all have some strange things, such as Bat Wolf, Blood Knight, Black Knight, and Stig. Effortless and thankless, catch a bunch of zombies and go back. Nagaros doesn't have a bicycle for them to step on, nor does he need to generate electricity. Under the leadership of Lord Batwolf, Barto the old farmer bravely resisted the pirates of Druzy. Darius dare not think of such a difficult thing. The ship continued to sail northward, and after Lyonnaise annexed Muzelin, it became the longest duchy on the coastline. The coastline within the duchy was rugged, with many small islands. Offshore currents can be tricky for outsiders, but locals can easily predict them, and these islands have better ports than mainland coasts. Most coastal villages in Lyonnaise are actually located near the sea and scattered on islands. Even some old farmers in certain villages lure boats onto the rocks and plunder the wreckage. The coastline of Duke Luengoland to the north is very short, and the terrain along the coast is rugged. In most coastal areas, towering cliffs penetrate straight into the seabed, and reefs stand tall in the water. The water flow on the shore is also exceptionally dangerous, even with skilled pilots, it often capsizes. Dostan cold-eyed told Daxus that this place is almost industrialized, and some Captain Druzy even became strategic partners with local knights. The captains of Druzy specially brought people to their partners, allowing those black-edged or unpopular descendants to die in glory, and the knights would gain fame. In addition, the Night Lord regularly sends unlucky people in the form of commodities to Nagaros to experience the local customs and hospitality. Black Blade is the illegitimate son of the Duruqi society, such as Varahar of Hagrid Graves and Maris Black Blade, the 6th son of Lihan Fallen Blade. Snakes have their way, and mice have their way. Daxus was stunned and his 3 views were shattered. It's really outrageous to have grown up, far from the big picture. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Night's Dream. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Night's Dream. The next morning, I encountered a small longitudinal sailboat called the Druze, and when I saw the cold winter, I dodged it without any intention of communicating. Perhaps it was because I was afraid of black eating black. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I encountered another Duruqi double-masted schooner and ran away as soon as I saw the cold winter turn around. At this moment, Daxus realized that his Duruqi three-masted sail raider was indeed a bit of a supermodel. This type of ship was designed to complement the Black Ark, just like the Great Drive in the carrier battle group. On the fourth day, we bypassed the city of Lyoness and the surrounding islands by night, and drove to the northern city of Sorrel, ready to find a place to land. More than 20 Bartanian cavalry stopped and raised their hooves on the grass. The evening sunlight seeped in from the forest, casting speckled light on their armor. On the northern mountains, they can smell the smell of the sea and hear the sound of distant waves. The attendants on horseback are returning from the hill. Their steps and demeanor indicate that they have found what they are looking for. The leading knight took off his helmet, shook his hair, and revealed a young face. When he turned his head to look at his flag-bearer, there was a smug smile on his face. He smiled proudly and said, "It looks like we found our prey, My dear Bastien." Bastin lifted his mask and was also a young and handsome knight. He said in a low voice, "Maybe it's like this, Johnny." But the expression on his face was equally smug. Because they all know that they are about to become heroes again. Less than 2 hours north is the village of Avignon. Since the beginning of summer, it has been under attack. Of course, there are only a few hundred old farmers in the village, and there is nothing valuable that can be looted. But the responsibility of each knight is to protect the weak, and young chivalrous knights quickly seize the opportunity to prove their worth. Now it seems that Giovanni and Bastin, their best childhood companions, are about to become the saviors of Avignon. The captain of the attendants dismounted not far in front of them, ran over, took off his helmet, knelt in front of the two noble knights, and happily reported to Janiva. "We have found it, sir. It's a group of Duruqi, about 10 of them, walking, without mounts, wearing armor, and having a small campsite." Johnny asked, "Duruqi? Are you sure?" The captain of the attendants replied, "Yes, sir. I'm sure it's Duruqi, not a Norse." "Well done, very well prepared for battle," said Janiva to the attendant after exchanging a glance with Bastin. Janiva drew his sword and said, "Are you ready to fight, my friend?" After finishing, he slammed his legs between his mount and began jogging. Bastin said wisely, "Let's not be impulsive for now. Just think about it, our numbers are more than 3 times there, and we are all cavalry. We will directly crush them. Of course, if we can capture these drugs alive, we can get a substantial reward, and His Excellency the Duke of Hepens will also be very grateful to us." Janiva understood Basistin's suggestion and laughed, saying, "Ha ha ha. Basistin, you undoubtedly have the mind of a lord, no wonder I am in charge of commanding you." Bastin smiled brightly and said, "As you please." Then he turned to the cavalry attendants and said to them, "Attendants, let's go catch some Duruqi pirates now. They will regret setting foot on the land of Lyonnaise." The sound of horse hooves was like thunder, and the Bartanian cavalry marched forward bravely. The scouting of the horseback attendants was accurate. As the sun set over the bay, the brothers Daxus and Tatia led a team of Black Ark pirates to camp, light a fire, and cook. A large black and purple tent stood behind them, and the flag on the top of the tent swayed in the wind. A small boat ran aground on the beach. Daxus was picking wild fruits, feeling uneasy again in his heart. He frowned and asked, "Have we released the people we are guarding?" Flanas put down the wild fruit in his hand and said, "Sir, it was arranged to go out in the first 2 hours." Daxus cursed and said, "It's really strange." Bastin looked at Duruqi in the distance and said, "They don't even have bows or long-handled weapons. I've seen the goddess in the lake smiling at me." Janiva smiled at his flag-bearer and said, "The noblewomen will definitely love our story and be eager to fight against us." Bastin shook his wit and said, "My dear friend, ladies can fight better than any warrior I have ever encountered in battle." The two of them laughed heartily, and with Bastin's command, the attendants rushed over the hill in unison, charging towards Daxus and the others. Seeing the rushing Bartnian cavalry in the distance, the brothers Daxus and Tatia jumped up directly from their chairs. The Black Ark pirates threw down their work and drew out their weapons to line up around Daxus. "Sir, you go first." "We will fight to the death to stop them," said Flans urgently. Ren also quickly said, "Yes, sir, you go first, we will buy you time." Daxus chuckled angrily and said, "Damn it, what's this? There's no reason for me to leave first." Then gritted his teeth and said, "Delay. Delay. Put down your weapons. We surrender." Daxus stepped out of the formation and raised a Bartnian salute in front of the galloping cavalry. The Black Ark pirates also laid down their weapons at the captain's command. The Bartnian cavalry saw Duruqi raise their hand and surrender, slowing down the horse's speed. Gianiva elegantly stopped in front of Daxus and pointed his spear at him, with the tip of the spear touching his nose even further forward. Daxus did not take a step back, raised his hand and looked up at Gianiva. "You are now the Baron of Valence, the savior of Colony, the savior of Avignon, and the prisoner of Gianiva de Valence. You will be tried for the crimes committed against this land, and before the trial, I assure you that you will not be mistreated," said Gianiva, lifting his helmet with his left hand and holding his chin and toes high. Daxus looked at the chivalrous knight in front of him and pondered, "What a stinky thing. My mind is full of nightly dreams." Then he politely smiled and said elegantly in Bartnian, "Respected Baron, please forgive us. They are well aware of their crimes, and so am I. I am Baldec Blackblade, a descendant of the Thousand Swallows family of Karen Karl. I offer my sword to you. We are willing to obey your authority, and there will be no more disputes today. Tomorrow we will face the trial calmly." As he skillfully untied the noble curved sword from his waist, he sheathed the noble curved sword. "Raise both hands towards Gianiva." Bartnian and imperialist languages have no differences in grammar except for some words, just like High German and Low German. End of this chapter.